The Sphinx, a monstrous living statue. A terrifying human-lion hybrid.
These great mythical beasts inspired both awe and respect, but also fear.
They bore the faces of Egyptian pharaohs who believed these creatures could grant them huge power.
The buildings and the artworks that the ancient Egyptians created had a magical function.
What inspired this formidable mutant? Why was it created? And what role did it play in the pharaoh's quest for immortality? Today, teams of experts use the latest science and archaeology to uncover the truth about this incredible beast.
We are a little bit nervous when we are lifting it.
And reveal how the Great Sphinx became as mighty as the pharaohs themselves. The Sphinx. For over 2,000 years, this strange and terrifying hybrid creature has held us in its thrall.
The Sphinx can be seen in representations across cultures, from Egypt to Greece to India to Asia.
The Greeks feared it as a ferocious man-eater. The Arabic world knew it as the father of terror.
The imagery of a sphinx was obviously very powerful, and it appears in many other cultures, but oftentimes very different. In Greece, for example, it came out downright nasty and mean.
But nowhere was the Sphinx more powerful and revered than in Egypt. The most famous Sphinx sits alongside the pyramids of Giza. But countless more once covered this desert kingdom. Each one bore the face of a pharaoh, including the boy king Tutankhamun.
There aren't many creatures in world history that have such a lasting legacy as the ancient Egyptian Sphinx.
Why did this bizarre mutant have such a strong and powerful hold on so many cultures? What did it offer its devoted followers? Egyptologist Dr. Campbell Price is on a mission to uncover the truth behind this beast and how it was created.
The Great Sphinx here at Giza is the oldest and largest colossal statue from ancient Egypt. We know remarkably little about why it was built or even really what it represents.
Campbell has discovered that the ancient Egyptians had a very different view of statues than we have today.
This is the ancient Egyptian word in hieroglyphs for sphinx, shesep ankh, or living image. Although we tend to think of sculptures as artworks, in ancient Egypt, statues were powerful, magical objects. They had a life of their own.
In the age of the pharaohs, there was nothing mythical about this creature. This statue is not a representation of the Sphinx. This is the Sphinx. But why did the pharaohs want to transform themselves into a living statue of a human-animal mutant? Campbell thinks the answer could lie in the one element of the Sphinx that remains constant across cultures: the lion's body. He examines a 500-year-old carving to investigate how Egypt's rulers first depicted themselves as lions.
It's a scene of total carnage. In the center, amidst prisoners bound up and prisoners being mauled, is a giant depiction of a lion. This isn't just any lion, this is a depiction of the pharaoh himself, in control, battling Egypt's enemies, and meting out vengeance to anyone who opposes him.
The lion is always, in every culture, considered the king of the beasts. It's a killing machine.
Throughout time and within specific cultures, you can typically find that the most dominant beast, so the largest wild animal, the most powerful, the strongest, comes to represent the royalty, the nobles, the leaders in that society.
One famous pharaoh even took this fascination with lions to his grave. At Giza, experts restore tens of thousands of artifacts. Some of the most precious were buried with the boy king Tutankhamun.
As you see, this bit from Tutankhamun collection, especially in the face, so you can see the inlay in eye and in the nose. This take a lion shape.
The imagery that immediately stands out on Tutankhamun's grave goods is of lions, from his ceremonial bed to his chariot.
The king takes the power from the lion.
Before 3000 BC, lions would have been a common sight in Egypt. But as Egyptians swapped their nomadic life for farming, to protect their livestock, lions were hunted almost to extinction. Yet the image of this fearsome predator survived as a symbol of the ferocious might expected of a king. But if these beasts were so powerful, why didn't the pharaohs continue depicting themselves simply as lions? Why did a pharaoh decide to become the Sphinx? The answer could lie in how gods were represented in Egypt's greatest temple.
The ancient Egyptian gods were superhuman beings, and the best way to depict superhuman beings was to give them the powers of animals.
The temple of Karnak at Luxor is covered in human-animal hybrids.
Even today, Egyptian gods are recognizable by their animal heads, and in ancient Egypt, this would be the hallmark of a god: animal head, human body.
Similar to modern-day superheroes like Wolverine or Spider-Man, each god's animal represented their nature and function. Heket, the goddess of childbirth and fertility, has the head of a frog. When the Nile floods, tadpoles appear in their thousands, which is why the tadpole is the hieroglyph for the number 100,000. Anubis is the jackal-headed god of the dead. Jackals often scavenge around cemeteries, so ancient Egyptians connect them with death. And Khepri, the creator god, has a scarab beetle head. Scarabs lay their eggs in dung balls, so their young seem to emerge from nothing. A fitting trait for the god of creation.
It's often difficult for us to grasp in society where we're used to one god. But in those societies, the divine would take on the shape that was most appropriate to get the job done.
If you had the body of a lion, as a god, this gave you strength, might, and ferocity. According to myth, the sun god Ra sends his daughter Sekhmet down to Earth to punish humans who deserted him. As the goddess of war, Sekhmet doesn't take any prisoners. She goes on a killing spree that threatens to wipe out humanity. To stop the bloodshed, Ra tricks his daughter, flooding the earth with beer and pomegranate juice. Thinking it's the blood of her victims, Sekhmet drinks Ra's cocktail. She passes out for 3 days, when she awakes, her rage has gone. The message is clear. Only a god could harness the power of a lion. By merging themselves with this animal, the pharaohs wanted to proclaim their divine status.
The pharaohs would represent themselves as having heads or different parts of animals. This wasn't something that an ordinary person like you or me could do.
But there's a mystery. Most Egyptian hybrid beasts have animal heads and human bodies. Why is the Sphinx the other way around?
We know we have this very wise and advanced mind, but when it comes to our physical body, we really don't match up against a lot of wild animals. So being able to create a beast that is the combination of our best trait, our mind, and the best trait of the wild animal kingdom makes a lot of sense.
But which ruler was bold enough to first turn himself into a giant living statue?
There are no records as to why or how this mythical beast was created.
Egyptologist Dr. Campbell Price thinks answers may lie here, in the lair of Egypt's very first Sphinx.
So here we can see on a view of the Giza necropolis, we've got the Great Sphinx down here and the pyramid of Khafre up at the top, and it seems very particularly clear on this image that the two of these are associated, they're connected together. So it seems safe to assume that Khafre built both the pyramid and the Great Sphinx.
King Khafre ruled Egypt around 2500 BC. He's famous for building one of the three Great Pyramids. Yet he remains a mysterious figure.
We know almost nothing about Khafre the man, but we do have an account from the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote in the 5th century BC, so centuries after Khafre had died. And Herodotus said that Khafre, like his father Khufu, were detested. They were despotic rulers who forced the people to build the Great Pyramids. So the only account we have of Khafre himself makes him out to be a megalomaniac.
Khafre needed a monumental effort to create the mighty Sphinx. Four and a half thousand years ago, in the shadow of the pyramids, workers ripped thousands of tons of rock from the ground to carve out a colossal creature the size of a jumbo jet. It had a human head that towered 20 meters high, and lion's claws that stretched more than 18 meters in front. The fusion of king and beast created a truly epic mythical creature. How did Khafre hope to use this giant stone monster to gain more power in this world and the next? The answer could lie in the temple at the Sphinx's monumental feet.
I'm walking down the middle line of the temple, and the compass shows me that that line is exactly orientated east-west.
Some archaeologists think this is too exact to be a mere coincidence. The Sphinx and its temple align with the path of the setting sun.
We know the ancient Egyptians were very interested in the movements of the sun. So at 2 times of year, something amazing happens, which gives us a clue to the significance of the creation of this colossal beast.
The gigantic pyramids dominate the Giza plateau. But twice a year, the monster Sphinx takes center stage in a giant special effect. Seen from the Sphinx temple on the March and September equinoxes, the setting sun sinks into the shoulder of the great beast and into Khafre's pyramid on the horizon. From above, the shadows of the Sphinx and the pyramid merge at the temple, forging a connection between the Sphinx and the sun god.
The guys who built the big pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, all had a very close and special relationship with the sun god because their family described themselves as sons of the sun god.
For the ancient Egyptians, the cycle of the sun was very important. Just as the sun rose and set every day, the king, the pharaoh, hoped to do the same thing. And so by connecting himself with the sun god, he could have this eternal life.
The ancient Egyptians had many deities, but to the pharaohs, the sun wasn't just another god. He was their father and offered them immortality. One theory suggests that the Sphinx and the pyramid were two halves of a plan that would allow Khafre to live on forever.
The pyramids, the Sphinx, and the surrounding temples were part of a machine, an engine to launch the spirit of the pharaoh into the afterlife to join their divine father, the sun god.
Ancient Egyptians believed these monuments were a gateway to the afterlife. Deep inside the pyramid, the soul of the pharaoh can safely leave his body and ascend towards the kingdom of the dead. To aid its journey, magic spells on the walls fend off evil spirits, while internal passageways guide it skywards to the sun god Ra. The shape of a pyramid mimics the rays of the sun, allowing the pharaoh's soul to merge with Ra and reach the eternal afterlife. But the Sphinx wouldn't just help Khafre to be a god in the afterlife. Like the pyramid, it was an eternal reminder of his status as a god on Earth. But Campbell thinks the complex of Sphinx, temples, and pyramid, designed to launch Khafre to the afterlife, was never completed.
To understand what happened to Khafre's resurrection machine here at Giza, we have to go down into the Sphinx enclosure itself. Very few people get to go inside, so it's a special privilege to get out there and explore. The ancient Egyptians talked about this area as setepet, which means chosen or select, and it meant that only certain people could get restricted access to this space.
Seen from the air, the huge wall to the right of the Sphinx's enclosure appears incomplete.
This shelf of bedrock to the north side of the Sphinx looks messy, it looks unfinished, which implies the entire Sphinx enclosure was incomplete during Khafre's reign, which begs the question, why?
Campbell suspects the builders abandoned their work. But can he find tangible evidence that Khafre's laborers really did leave the job half done?
This area looks likely to have had evidence of ancient working. So you can imagine a workman using a stone, a kind of pounding stone, which would be a harder material than the limestone here, and in sections release chunks at a time and eventually demolish whole sections of the stone. But I can just imagine the workers in the full heat with these stones. It must have been a pretty hellish work.
Campbell finds what he's looking for: proof that this rock face was still being worked on when it was abandoned.
These three channels show quite nicely the process of stone extraction in ancient Egypt. Workmen would create channels between lumps of stone, and then they'd bring hard stone, kind of hammer stones in to move bits of this rock in chunks to clear this area along the north side of the Sphinx enclosure.
But the ledge was never brought down to the level of the floor to create a smooth wall. Why? Campbell suspects, after Khafre's death, his successor ordered the workers to start on his pyramid.
We don't know for sure, but it's likely that when the king died, the workmen responsible for making the enclosure simply downed tools and moved on to the next major royal building project.
The power of this terrifying creature faded after the pharaoh's death. Building colossal monuments was an expensive business. During Khafre's dynasty, these overambitious pyramid projects peaked. Khafre's son, Menkaure, built a much more modest tomb, just half the size of his father's. Eventually, resources started to dry up, and the Giza plateau became impossible to maintain. Grave robbers looted the pyramids. The Great Sphinx lay half buried, a curiosity for later generations to wonder at. It looked like the Sphinx's days were over, and it would be completely swallowed by the desert sand. How did this hybrid creature manage to claw its way back into the center of Egyptian power?
The figure of the ancient Egyptian Sphinx inspired pharaohs for thousands of years. It wasn't just something that was a moment in time. It was part of their history forever.
Searching between the colossal paws, Dr. Campbell Price investigates a carving that may provide the answer.
A stela is like an ancient Egyptian billboard. It's an advert to living people and also to the gods of an important message. Really big ones, like this made of stone, belong to kings.
This 4-meter-high tablet is covered in hieroglyphs, the picture-based writing system used by the ancient Egyptians.
So here we're looking for a king's name, and indeed I can see several indications of a royal name on there. We see there are 3 distinct symbols in this oval shape called a cartouche. And we know that can only be Thutmose IV, a very important king in the 18th dynasty who lived about 1400 BC.
This was over 1,000 years after Khafre.
The text on the stela records when Prince Thutmose is indeed just a prince, he's not the king. He encounters the Sphinx, but in fact it's almost completely covered in sand.
The inscription describes Prince Thutmose resting in the shadow of the Sphinx. In the midday heat, Thutmose falls asleep, and the Sphinx comes to him in a dream. Speaking with the voice of the god of the rising sun, "If you free me from the sand," it says, "I'll make you king." When he wakes, the prince does as he's told and unearths the Sphinx. Soon after, Thutmose's older brother dies mysteriously, and he inherits the throne. The Sphinx has kept its word.
One of the ways that the ancient Egyptians could interact with their gods was through dreams. The Egyptians believed that gods could come to them in their dreams and help them solve problems or receive cures from the gods. So this was one way for the Egyptians to have that interaction with the divine.
The Sphinx now spoke with the voice of Egypt's greatest god. Thutmose's dream had made it mightier than ever. It was now the power behind the throne.
It's a place of pilgrimage where new kings come to assert their right to the throne. This ancient god has to be sought out to give his stamp of approval to every new king.
This monstrous hybrid once again stood at the center of Egyptian life. But why did later pharaohs build not one, but whole armies of sphinxes?
It doesn't get much more ancient Egyptian than this. A multitude of sphinxes.
The Avenue of the Sphinxes in Luxor, stretching as far as the eye can see, a huge army of these part lion, part human beasts. A clue to why they're here lies in the two religious sites that are linked by the avenue. At one end is Karnak, the home of Amun, king of all gods. More than 2 kilometers to the south is Luxor, a vast temple where the pharaohs make offerings to the gods. Between them, an avenue lined with an incredible 1,350 Sphinx statues, forming a spiritual highway joining the two sacred sites. Why are the Sphinxes here? The first step is to discover whose face is on them. Archaeologist Dr. Mustafa El-Sahir is still finding statues.
Today we are making excavation to discover all the statues of the Sphinx.
Mustafa and his team are rebuilding one of these magnificent beasts, piece by piece.
It takes time, but patience is really something important. The final stage is we have to put the head over.
A mistake now could send the ancient sculpture crashing to the ground.
We are a little bit nervous when we are lifting it. It's really heavy.
With the statue now complete, it's possible to take a close look at the face. Whose is it?
It takes the shape of a human head sphinx, typical of Nectanebo I.
Nectanebo I ruled Egypt in 400 BC, over 2,000 years after the first Sphinx was created. In that period, pharaoh after pharaoh built sphinxes with their face on.
We know of particular kings who seem particularly fond of this form. Queen Hatshepsut's a good example. She was a female pharaoh. Then there was a king like Amenemhat III, very powerful Middle Kingdom ruler. He, instead of showing himself with a royal headcloth, has the full mane of the lion.
At the avenue, new pharaohs would replace the heads of their predecessor sphinxes. The flexibility of the beast helped it survive for so long.
Individual pharaohs could have their own sets of sphinxes without the form being necessarily associated with one particular king.
No ruler built more sphinxes than Nectanebo. It's the greatest concentration of sphinxes in the world. Campbell Price thinks a clue to why Nectanebo commissioned a whole army of sphinxes lies with the avenue itself.
When we look at this bank of sphinxes lined up like sentinels on either side of the avenue, their purpose must have been to do with the action in the middle.
This huge boulevard was the centerpiece for one of ancient Egypt's most sacred festivals. Once a year, all eyes in Egypt are on the Avenue of the Sphinxes, as priests carry a statue of the god Amun from Karnak to Luxor. Just like the Sphinxes, the statue of Amun is thought to be alive. These ferocious living sculptures keep watch as the god receives his annual offerings from the pharaoh. A sacred ritual that reminds Egyptians of their king's divine authority. Campbell thinks the army of sphinxes played an integral role in this ceremony. They ensured it could take place.
Although the ancient Egyptian gods were incredibly powerful, they were also rather vulnerable, especially when they left their temple homes. They needed magical, ritual protection. So that's what this squadron of sphinxes is doing here. They're acting as guardians for the gods on their ritual journeys.
The divine sphinx was becoming the protector of other gods. A figure of benevolence.
The key thing in the success of this form is its adaptability, its flexibility. That accounts for the fact the Sphinx, that beast, that image of the beast, is so successful for more than 2,000 years.
But why did this mighty beast finally fall from glory? At the Avenue of the Sphinxes, archaeologist Dr. Mustafa El-Sahir uncovers a potential clue.
One of the most important things we just found is an inscribed block here, this one, which has the name of Cleopatra.
The famous Queen Cleopatra was Egypt's last pharaoh. She oversaw huge building works, each inscribed with her royal title. But there's something wrong with this inscription.
Here, we can see the signs of Cleopatra. In fact, it was built but upside down.
The fact the name is the wrong way up proves this stone was taken from its original building and reused.
I think this cartouche of Cleopatra comes from the area around Avenue Sphinx, maybe from Luxor Temple or even Karnak Temple.
A fearsome army of sphinxes stood guard, perhaps to protect one of Cleopatra's sacred royal buildings. But they were to witness it mercilessly torn down.
Cleopatra was the last queen of Egypt before the Roman times. And then Egypt became a part of the Roman Empire after that.
When the Romans conquered Egypt, Cleopatra's building may have been brutally repurposed for their own construction projects. Right here, under the very noses of the royal stone protectors. The era of the Sphinx in Egypt was coming to an end. But it wasn't the Romans who drove the final nail into the Sphinx's coffin. The clues lie in the mighty Karnak temple.
I've been coming to Karnak for years, and this is the first time I've seen, at the back of the temple, a very special and interesting monument.
The damage to this statue is the result of more than just erosion.
Here is a statue of Thutmose III, the builder of this festival hall. It's been changed, it's been viciously attacked, resculpted into the image of a cross. That gives us a clue as to the fate of the image of the Sphinx.
Campbell finds more evidence just round the corner. Amongst paintings that are over 3,000 years old, there is a surprise intruder.
Here, in this beautiful painted hall, amidst the glorious colours, there is an image of a Christian saint.
Fleeing Roman persecution, some of the very first Christians lived among these abandoned halls. They quickly turned from oppressed minority to dominant majority. All of a sudden, the Sphinx was cornered.
The Christians were hiding out from the Romans, but they wouldn't be hiding out for long, because when Christianity took hold in Egypt, that spelled the end of the ancient gods. As it says in the Bible, the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me.
The Christians banned worship of pagan icons, bringing an end to more than 2 millennia of Sphinx domination in Egypt. But the nature of the Sphinx would change again, and elsewhere it would rise once more as a symbol of evil. Why? A clue lies at Olympia in Greece. Here, archaeologist Anthi Dipler investigates another hybrid beast with the body of a lion, the griffin.
This amazing creature can be seen on this Sicilian coin dated to the 4th century BC. As you can see, the griffin was composed of 2 mighty animals, the lion and the eagle.
The ancient Greeks believed the griffins lived far away in Central Asia. Here they nest. Among its eggs are nuggets of gold, dug up when building its nest. In the day, the griffin shields its eggs from the blazing sun. And at night, it must protect them from treasure hunters, trying to steal the gold from under the griffin's beak. But its acute hearing detects any intruder, and it's ready to kill. In Greece, griffins and sphinxes have many similarities. Both creatures have the body of a powerful lion. Both have wings and come from distant lands via the Near East.
Look at his upright ears, his open mouth, the scary face. He's permanently vigilant, permanently on the watch. So this fearsome creature is perfect for intimidating would-be robbers.
The Greeks were fascinated by hybrid creatures, like the griffin and the Sphinx. They depicted them in countless artworks. Both mutant beasts could be ferocious.
The person who asked for this griffin head to be attached to the cauldron he offered to the gods wanted to show a layer of supernatural protection, as if harnessing this monster to protect the treasure.
It's likely that travelers brought back tales of both the Sphinx and the griffin to Greece. Comparative anatomist Dr. Joy Reidenberg investigates what might lie behind the griffin stories that made it such a terrifying protector.
There's a new theory that the griffin may actually be based on a fossil find. Something like this. This is a cast of a protoceratops.
There's one aspect of the skull that stands out.
This iconic beak is what really captures the imagination, because this beak looks like an eagle's beak. You can see the point right in the front here, meeting a bottom jaw here, and it was massive, and it was powerful. It could give you a really hard bite and probably snap your body in two.
According to the theory, the immense frame of the protoceratops could also have inspired the notion of a lion's body.
So if you don't know about dinosaurs, what are you going to relate this to? If you've got something with a bird-shaped beak and it's got a body roughly the size of a lion, and we knew lions were in the area at the time, we put those two together, now you've got a bird-headed lion. That's your griffin.
The Greeks loved the bizarre biology of these dangerous hybrid beasts. In the Middle East, the Sphinx was nasty and aggressive. So they assimilated it into their mythological world of evil monsters. It became the sibling of the Chimera, the multi-headed Hydra, and their hellhound Cerberus.
Once a divine figure, symbol of the pharaohs, the Sphinx transforms itself into a monstrous creature in Greek art.
But it hadn't only mutated into an evil and terrifying creature. It had become female.
This miniature is a fine example of what a Sphinx looked like in Greek art. A lioness body, the wings, and the head or the bust of a beautiful maiden. Unlike her predecessors in Egypt, she is almost consistently female in Greek art.
This was a symbol of horror for a male-dominated society.
Normally, it's the men taking control of women. In this case, we have the Sphinx as a wild woman who attacks men, and especially young men. She is a man-eater.
According to Greek mythology, a Sphinx terrorizes the people of Thebes with a deadly riddle. What has 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet in the afternoon, and 3 feet at night? Anyone who can't answer the question pays with their life. But a hero called Oedipus cracks her riddle. Humans. First they crawl on all 4s, then walk on 2 legs, and finally, they need a walking stick when they're old. Humiliated, the Sphinx devours herself.
The Greeks tended to take on other people's stories and then make them their own. In the changing of the story of the Sphinx, it lost its original meaning and was turned into a complete monster.
Starting out as the living body of a king, the Sphinx developed extraordinary power and became a sacred guardian for the gods themselves.
Symbols like the Sphinx were the bridge between the divine world and the actual world.
I think when we think about these mythical creatures, one of the reasons why their stories endure is because all of these creatures share power, and that is what the ancient peoples were interested in. A way to harness this power and use it for their benefit.
The Sphinx's fame spread beyond Egypt's borders, where it became a man-eating monster. Very different from the original divine beast. By piecing together clues and uncovering its secrets, we're coming closer to understanding one of the world's greatest mythical beasts.